Hi there. For this video clip, I'm going to show you how camera operations work on older cameras as well as current cameras, just to kind of show you guys the difference between, I guess, vintage cameras and modern contemporary cameras. So I figured this would be a good example to show you guys. Essentially, what a camera really needs are 5 things that will make the camera work. You need a way to focus the camera. You need a way to set the shutter speed. You need a way to set the aperture. You need a way to control the ISO somehow. And the fifth one is you need a way to trip your camera, or push the button, or take a picture, really, or trip the shutter. So that's it. That's all there is. The 5 basic components on a camera, and I'll show you kind of how it works on a camera to the left. This is my Leica camera. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pause this video right now, ask you the question, and make you guess what you think the difference in age is between these two cameras. I'm just curious to see what you guys think. Okay, so to continue on, the age between these two cameras is over 60 years. So it's 62 years to be exact. The Leica camera on the left here is made in 1958. Okay, maybe 61. This Nikon on the right here might be from a year ago. Well over a year ago. So you're looking at, anyways, regardless, 60 years apart between these two cameras. And we're going to show you how those two functions still exist on these cameras, and that's all you really need to take a picture. So I'm going to start with the camera on the left, which is the Leica. And really, I'm just going to go over what the 5 components are on each camera, and you'll see how really easy it is to manipulate and use these cameras, whether it's 60 years old or really current. So you need a way to focus, and that is achieved usually by, on these older cameras, a focusing knob. So I've got my focusing knob here. This lens is really compact, so what this does is allows me to focus, and that lets me achieve focus. A lot of the older cameras do have these distance scales, so that helps you aid in focus. You need a way to trip your shutter speed, and I don't know if you can see this knob here, but I have shutter speeds available here from 1 second to half a second, quarter of a second, 1/8 of a second. When it says 15 like this, it's a 15th of a second. 30, 60, 125, 250, 500, 1000. So the top speed on this camera tops out at 1000. And there are your shutter speeds. The B here is the bulb mode, which allows you to trip the shutter and leave the shutter open for an indefinite amount of time until you choose to close the shutter. So there's the way to trip your, there's the way to set your shutter speed. You also need a way to change your aperture, and how that's done on a camera like this is that there's a little aperture dial up here, and it shows me a scale here, and that goes from f2.5, 2.8 onwards to 5.6, f8, f11, f16, f22. And on some of these older cameras, what you can actually do is you can see the shutter blades work, because these are all mechanical cameras. They're old. They don't have any electronics whatsoever. The shutter speeds you can see working here. This is f22, so when I talk about very small aperture, this would be an example of a very slow aperture. If you choose, and the term usually is to open up your aperture. So if you go to f25, you can see how that's a lot more open. And that is essentially how you control your aperture. another thing you need to set on your camera is how to change your ISO. Now, on film cameras, that isn't really an option. So, because what happens is the ISO is actually preset on your film. So, whatever film you choose to put in a film camera, that is the ISO you'll be working at. So something like this, 200 ISO. If I put that in the camera, there is really no way to set the ISO on a camera this old, but regardless, that ISO is preset and predetermined for you. So you have to kind of work with that. And the last thing you need is really just a way to trip the camera, and that's just this button here. That's all there is to it, really. There's other functions, obviously, clearly on this older camera, like how to wind the film and advance, but those are not really the mechanics of how a picture is made. Those are kind of the way a camera operates, but there you are. They're essentially your 5 things. You got your control method, or your focusing method, your aperture ring, your shutter speed, the ISO is predetermined, and then there's a shutter here for you to take your picture. And that's all there is. So moving on to a modern digital camera. So moving on to a mirrorless camera. This is a modern day mirrorless camera. It's a Nikon Z6, and it achieves autofocus for you, so you really don't have to worry about that too much. There are various ways to change the characteristics of the autofocus and how it works, but most cameras you're going to buy today are automatic cameras, autofocusing cameras that can do the focusing for you. Okay. There's various ways to trigger that, but you have to check your manual for that. And moving on, there is a way to set the aperture. So most cameras have something like a manual mode, and they have dials either at the front here or at the back. And when you see my screen here, you can see my aperture change. So 2.8. There are smaller steps in these cameras because they do like a half step. So it's a 3.3 to f4, 4.8, f5, 6, 6.7, f8, all the way to f16, which is the maximum aperture on this lens. So that's the way the aperture is controlled. You just go left and right on this dial. The back dial I have here controls the shutter speed. So here I have a 1/15 of a second. They can seem to be a little bit confusing because they do such small increments. So here's 1/30th of a second, and I gotta really crank it to go to like 1,000th of a second, which actually is the maximum speed on my older camera. But these new modern cameras can kind of go beyond that. So these cameras can top out at something like 4,000. Some really top out at 8,000. So you can get a really high shutter speed on most modern day cameras. The fourth thing would be a way to control the ISO. So because digital cameras don't take film, you can preset the ISO on modern day cameras. And here you can see a little ISO button. And if I adjust that, you can see that I can drop this ISO down to 100. I can bring it up to 400, 800, all the way to 1600. Just to again remind you guys that from 100 to 200 is one stop. From 200 to 400 is one stop. But if you go from 100 to 400, that's 2 stops. We'll touch up on that in a bit. But essentially, you can go really high on ISOs on most modern day cameras, and you don't have to suffer, having to change films and change film types. Just to let you know, like modern day cameras take care of a lot of things for you. So there is a lot of convenience in photography these days. So there's how you control your ISO, and you can notice that like the controls are very close on these cameras, and they're built that way and designed that way for most professional photographers, because those are really the essentials and the basic mechanisms of how to operate cameras. So you can see that it's all built very close. You can control your aperture, you can control your shutter speed, and your ISO is right here for you to use, and you can switch through that as fast as your fingers will let you. You can take 100 ISO for your one shot, and you can go right up to 800 or 1600 for your next shot. Very convenient. And all there is really left is a way to trip the shutter. And once you've achieved focus, you just take the picture. So those are the basic mechanisms of how cameras work. If you have any further questions, please let me know. Thanks.